Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Bardstream. Esper here. Thank you. I hopefully am back on a more regular schedule now of every first Tuesday. Let's see. My life is kind of crazy right now. Monstrous Heroes is going well, but it's very, very complex. It's a lot of work, and that's on top of all my regular work. So I would say that things are going quite well, but I'm not quite to the point where I feel like I can breathe easy. Still need to do a lot of revision with the monster classes. Still have some other sections, kind of secondary sections of the book that need some development. But that said, some major chunks, main chunks of the book are in place, and it's onto the editing and the fine-tuning of a lot of stuff. However, this Bardstream is actually not about Monsters Heroes. Not at all. So we're kind of taking a break from all that stuff. I've got a guest that's a patron, and I've got a question from a different patron. So we're going to have a cool chat, and I'm going to talk about this question that I got about ships and ship combat. There is a update on my Patreon, by the way. I'll mention that real quickly. So I've decided to just keep these Bard streams permanently public now instead of turning them into like patron only archive. There's a couple reasons for that. One is just part of the reformatting I'm doing on my Patreon. The other part is that it's not really necessary anymore because YouTube has separated the like regular video uploads and the live streams into two different sections on everyone's channel page. So no longer is there that kind of clutter that used to happen when the live streams would be all just kind of thrown in there with all the regular videos. And actually, I can show you real quick, like here, how things look on the new revamped Patreon. So there are a number of different levels now. There's a link down in the video description. Feel free to go check that out. Every month, there's a lot of content. Some of it's free and some of it's patron only. So there's a free version of the newsletter and a free version of the RPG map every month. The free map is kind of a smaller one, still enough that you could use it as like a dungeon or a battle location, but not as big as the full one. And then the newsletter is kind of the same thing. It has some content in there. It's cool. You get an update from me. You get like an article or two, maybe a monster in there. So it's like a cool bite-sized thing. And then I do this drawing every month as well. And then at these higher tiers, people get access to the full map, the full newsletter. So you just get a lot more content. You get entries into the drawing. And then if you're drawn, you get to select from different types of rewards, like a monster of your concept put into the newsletter, or coming on the Bard stream, or submitting a topic that I cover in a Bard stream, or a Zoom call, like a one-on-one Zoom call with me, or I could give you feedback or critique on something that you're developing. So this kind of leaves it up to the person who gets drawn. Actually, I do two names every month. So a couple people win that every month. Once I get to 200 patrons, I'm going to increase that to 3 drawings per month. And then there's some higher level tiers as well, where you can get even more entries into the drawing. You can get access to a private Discord channel that I interact with quite a bit, get your name into credits. And, in the end, the main thing to show support to the channel if you like this content and you like my work. So speaking of this drawing, I was very pleased when I did the last drawing because a name came up of someone who I've seen around the channel for quite a long time, a commenter and a subscriber. So I was very, very happy to see ViktorD20. I'll bring him on here and we'll just kind of chat about whatever he wants to chat about. So welcome, Victor. Hello. Yes. Yeah, you're good. Victor, or maybe I should say Viktor. So everybody, give some appreciation to Victor. He's actually in Finland, and has stayed up till nearly 4 a.m. I didn't know this. I wish I would have, because I probably would have arranged a more decent hour. But thank you very much. So I'll give you all the thanks now. Thank you for staying up to a super late hour. Thank you for being patient, because I actually had some confusion last month. I was initially intending to get you on last month. And thirdly, thank you for being a supporter for so long. And you're like one of the really cool supporters that like sends me messages and emails and stuff. The gold pieces are much appreciated, and they certainly get used. I tell you that, each and every one of them. And upcoming in the next newsletter, everybody, there's going to be a monster concept that Victor gave to me. And this was like the most fleshed out concept I've ever received from anyone who's been drawn. Like, has a stat block and like more than a page of lore, and it's like story type lore where you like actually wrote out a narrative, and you included a reference image. Can't hear Victor? Okay. How about that? You know what I bet they also can't hear is any background music. Okay. So
we did the audio test, so
we did the audio test. It was just a Esper's memory test. Let's put on some kind of background music. I'll go with Forest Shrine. There we go. Is it very woodsy where you live in Finland? Are there many trees or forests nearby?
I just looked out the window. The first thing I saw was a spruce, a birch, and a pine. So yeah, I'd say it's pretty foresty.
I like those a lot. I really like pine. The smell of the pine is really nice to me.
Pine wood furniture is some of my favorites.
I don't know a lot about Finland, but when I think of it in my head, forests come to my mind. Forest and cold. So
and lakes. Don't forget the lakes. We have a lot of them.
And lakes.
They stay warm until very late in the summer. So,
and
swimming is
then ocean to the south and the north, right?
But
like frozen to the north, right?
Norway cuts us off to the north. So.
Norway cuts you off to the north. Okay, but to the south, there is...
To the south, we have ocean, and to the southeast, there's a strait between Finland and Sweden. So.
Okay. But then across the water is like Lithuania or something, right? Like if
Estonia,
you go south,
then Latvia, and then Lithuania. I've been to Estonia before. Then we went briefly to Latvia. It was like a 5-minute car trip. We didn't like it, so we just turned back to Estonia.
This is the wonderful thing you can do when you live in Europe.
Yeah.
Unlike the United States, where you can drive like 10 hours and you're still in the United States.
Yeah.
So, yeah, obviously you are a RPG fan or gamer. I don't know how avid. Are you more of a player or more of a DM?
I'm a forever DM, basically. I mean, I've been trying to look for players' positions, but it's just really hard to find a game that speaks to me on a personal level. Because there's a very specific type of fantasy that I indulge in, and that is sword and sorcery, of course. I'm a huge fan of sword and sorcery and weird fiction. That kind of like Hyperborea stuff, and Conan, Elric especially is one that I've been enjoying very much recently. I actually recently concluded reading the first Elric story collection, so that was.
I've heard good things about Elric.
Yeah, no, it's amazing, and it paints this interesting world. I gotta say, like where law and chaos aren't necessarily like good and evil. Now, of course, chaos does eventually overstep its boundaries, and that leads to things happening. But
was Elric written by Vance?
No, that's Michael Moorcock.
Okay.
Vance wrote The Dying Earth.
That's right. Okay, that is true. And Moorcock is Elric. I've heard very good things about it, and I know that actually had influence on D&D. Those older Swords of Sorcery, like Gary Gygax, really liked those kinds.
The Law and Chaos Axis is the only reason the Law and Chaos Axis exists is because of two things. Michael Moorcock's writing, and then the story Three Hearts and Three Lions, I think, also had Law and Chaos
That's what
as
I've
two
heard.
cosmic forces, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
We can
Well,
also thank Three Hearts and Three Lions for D&D's trolls. So
are
in
they the
this one,
ones with like the green skinned regenerating things?
green skin, tentacly hair, and I
Uh
think
huh.
they regenerate their wounds. So,
Are
uh,
trolls a staple in Finnish culture?
well, we have
Is that
some stories of trolls. We don't, we mostly got giants though. Well, some
okay?
giants, a handful of them.
So
Goblins. We have goblins galore.
yeah, did you grow up hearing like old classic folk tale and fairy tale stuff?
Actually, I grew up reading them because I didn't really have any grandparent figures who would tell me those.
Okay.
Yeah, no, the grandparent figures by that point were living elsewhere or were 6 feet under,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately. Yeah.
I I got exposed to some of that stuff when I was young, just through like stuff on TV. But even that started to die off when I was still pretty young. Like certainly into the 90s. Once it got into the 90s, you wouldn't really see that stuff on TV anymore. But there used to be like old style animations where they would animate old tales and old fairy stories. And also, this is not animated, but there was Jim Henson's Storyteller. Have you ever seen that before?
I think I've seen clips of it, but not really a whole lot.
It was a fantastic show, but it just wasn't successful. Like he didn't have commercial success with it. But so it's pretty niche. But I really like it because
Yeah,
he took
there's a
the
lot of
old
Jim Henson.
stories and produced them as live action and sometimes with like animatronic monsters. And he stuck to the traditional stories. He didn't change them. He didn't do like what Disney did, where they would alter a number of details. So like the original Cinderella is way different and has some weirder and darker parts to it. And
Yeah, yeah,
but that
that's
those
something
kinds of
very much.
shows, that all that kind of old fashioned stuff people might say now, those all started to kind of die off once the 90s went throughout the 90s, I would say. And after that, I don't know, unless like you said, unless you had like an older relative who, or it maybe
Yeah,
is some kind of
or if you
traditional
had old
school.
books. I mean, yeah, that too. We were kind of obligated to read like at least a version of our national epoch epic. Not epoch. Epoch is a different word. Epic. I was thinking of our national epic, which features a bunch of singing wizards and stuff. We have a crazy folklore.
Now, when you're saying epic, you mean epic in the sense of like a poem or an epic
Well, let me put it
anthem?
this way. Uh, so you know, like how the Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien is a collection of stories from the first and second ages of Middle Earth.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it's like that. That's our national epic. Is a collection
Hmm.
of different stories from different parts of Finland regarding pretty much the same characters,
What's the name of
implying that
this
there's.
epic?
Okay, so this is really hard to pronounce for a foreigner, I imagine, but it's Kalevala.
Kalevala?
It's yeah, okay, you got it pretty good. It it has like every story from like the very it has like every story from every region of Finland. It's got and they've all been like brought together by these common themes of like wise sages and wizards who do singing battles with each other. It's
Wizards that do singing battles?
yeah,
Huh.
they literally do like dance-offs.
Uh-huh. So there's a connection between creative expression and the wielding of magic with these wizards.
In a sense, because for example, during one part of the during like one of the stories in this epic, one of the most powerful wizards in Finland at the time has to construct a new instrument so he can cast more potent spells.
Mm-hmm.
So he gets the jaw of a giant pike.
The fish.
Uh, yeah, the fish.
Uh-huh.
He gets a jaw of a ginormous pike, which is like the size of like two men. The hairs of a the golden hairs of a young woman and I think he finishes it off with like the teeth of some very
And the
like large.
hairs literally are the strings
Yeah, yeah, and he
of the harp.
yes, and yeah, and he plays spells with that until until like he eventually is forced out of Finland. There's a story like at the very end of the epic in which like essentially Jesus is born and forces paganism out of Finland.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know, personally, that last part, I like to ignore that because
Why is that?
Christianity, I don't know, Christianity never really spoke to me.
Uh-huh.
There's a reason I'm no longer part of the church. I was only mandated to be part of the church when I was young.
What is the most common or the typical church denomination in Finland?
Lutheran. We're
Lutheran, okay.
we're reformists.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
And so this epic, it collects a lot of old stories, like maybe we could say medieval or maybe even older than medieval.
Iron
Within
Age. We're talking Iron Age.
Iron Age. Okay, yeah. So early. No, that would be pre-medieval. Yeah, because
Yeah,
iron.
we're still in BC. In
Yeah,
Iron
yeah.
Age.
That's still BC for sure.
Yeah,
And it spans that, but then it in the latter part of the say again Kavavala.
yeah. That's it. That's correct. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, can't believe I said that. Okay. And then towards the latter sections of the book, it's the arrival of Christianity, which
Yeah,
that would bring
Christianity
it that
started
would bring it
arriving
into
like
like really Middle Ages times.
yeah, because they're like during the high Middle Age. Also, Nicholas A in chat, I just noticed said, I felt that scorn in Lutheran.
Oh my.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't have a lot of familiarity with Lutheranism. Just some things that I've studied and learned just from my own, my own reading and such. But I've never been. I've driven by Lutheran churches. There are some where I live, but I've never been inside one or had a real deep conversation to have a good feel for it. I would
Well,
like to, though.
actually,
I'm really interested in kind of
I like to
any
think.
topic that deals with big ideas or deep ideas.
Mm, no, yeah, personally, I like to think that that like the Lutheran branch is like one of the more mellow branches of Christianity. Very casual. Yeah.
And the perspective, let's say, in the Kavavala at the arrival of Christianity, is there a defined perspective, like a positive perspective, a negative, a mix of both, kind of a complicated.
I feel like it was a bit of a mix because like
Mm-hmm.
because the paganism which is represented by the old wizard kind of he kind of used this as a bad thing, like, oh well, I mean, like with this new faith there's no room for magic or our pagan faith anymore, so he sails away,
Mm-hmm.
which actually that's kind of reminiscent of how like the elves depart Middle Earth at the end of the Lord of the Rings.
Tolkien studied Finnish history and language.
Indeed,
I
that's
know he
correct.
did. Yeah. Are there other elements from the Kavavala that you could see Tolkien
Okay,
getting
this time I think you got
inspiration
it wrong.
from?
It's Kalevala.
Kalevala.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for the correction there. Do you see other elements or other segments of the Kalevala that Tolkien got inspiration from, or
I'm trying to think about it right now, and there is a tragic story of a brother and a sister, very similar to how like Tolkien wrote
Eowyn
the story of how Tolkien wrote the story of the children of Húrin.
in the
It's from the
Silmarillion?
Silmarillion. Yeah, it's also from the Silmarillion.
My
And
Silmarillion lore knowledge is like super shaky. It's not good.
yeah, no, like I reread it 3 times as a tween, so kind of Kind of
I
stuck
didn't
with me.
find it easy to read. I know I'm not alone in that boat. It's certainly different. It's like you said, collections of stories and lore and histories. So
Yeah, yeah. It's not the easiest read, but at the same time, it was able to keep my attention span, so I've got to give it like a 10 out of 10 for that one.
I should probably revisit it.
I
That would
recommend
only
it, but
be
yes. So
fair.
there's a tragic story of a brother and a sister, and the brother in like in the original Finnish version, the brother is, I think he's kind of stuck in his home, and his mother mistreats him a lot because I don't know. I mean, I don't remember the exact story, but like his mother does not like him at all, and at one point even goes as far as to like because like he was going out to do like woodwork at one point, so he has to be given like water and some bread so that he can eat. And this is like one of the this is like a very mellow, like this is much more mellow than the story of Hurin's Children, which is a full-on epic fantasy tragedy, kind of reminiscent of Romeo and Juliet as well in a way. But yeah, so
There's a
he
timeless appeal to that
there is a
story of the young. Usually, it's a male and a female in this case. This archetype that we're talking about could be a brother and sister, could be lovers, or like they aspiring wish they could be lovers, and they're young, and some kind of tragedy befalls them, and sometimes they're like a noble of noble birth, but not always. There's a lot of old stories and fairy tales and stuff where they're common people. They're just commoners, and they get mixed up in some strange magical thing. That's really what fairy means. I don't know if you know this or not, but the term fairy tale or fairy story, the meaning of that is like strange, supernatural, magical things. It's
yeah,
not
no, I,
quite the same as the way that pop culture has twisted it in the modern day, where people say fairy tale, and it's just like this perfect Disney romantic thing. Or I guess Disney's not even romantic
yeah.
anymore. I don't know what Disney's doing. We're not going to talk about that. But
We're not going to talk about Disney.
people say like, oh, a fairy tale vacation, a fairy tale wedding, and it's like, oh, everything is this like perfect, nice, sweet, happy, rose tinted affair.
Yeah, everything is
That's not the
wonderful.
original
Everything
meaning
is
of fairy.
amazing. Yeah, that is definitely
Fairy's
not.
like
That is
the
not it.
the weird things. They might help you. They might not help you. They might do very bad things to you.
And
And
if you're in Scotland, they might gut you.
yeah. And color their caps with your blood.
Unless you give them liver every night.
So, actually, let's shift gears slightly. As interesting as all this is, you were talking about something else, D&D related,
Yeah.
about storytelling, about players.
Yeah,
What
player-driven
was that?
storytelling. It was player-driven storytelling, which I've noticed is a lot more prominent in like the types of sandbox games I run because, well, when you give the players a free hand, they start forging their own story. Uh, one of the
Sure.
most recent examples of one of the
Okay.
most recent examples of this has been like my I run this like kind of, I don't want to say PvP game, but it's kind of like a light PvP game where where there's two parties in the same world on opposing sides. Uh,
Are these
Now
two different groups that you are running games for?
that is in fact the case, yeah, and they're all,
I
I
had
mean
a
we have
situation like
we
this
have a
once.
yeah, we have a shared Discord server where they can like talk to each other outside of game, but nobody shares anything about the other party's doings. Well, except when a PC dies, then we hold a parade or a
I had an
procession, I
experience like
guess I should
this
say.
many years ago in fourth edition. I was really, as soon as like the day fourth edition came out, I gathered a bunch of friends at my apartment at that time, and they split into two groups, and they made their characters, and 2 campaigns got born, and so they were essentially progressing at the same speed, pretty much. And then after some levels, they both ended up in the same city, participating in the same gladiatorial games. And we literally had a combat encounter that it was their 2 different parties fighting each other.
Okay.
It didn't turn out so great, but that was more of a problem of just those specific groups as opposed to that format. I think that format could work if everybody is on board. If all the players in both the groups want that, I think it totally could work. Unfortunately, that's not quite the situation that I had with those campaigns. Where there was one of the groups that was interested, like they liked that idea. They got kind of pumped up about it, and they were, I would say, more combat savvy. They were a little more combat savvy, more into like building their characters and building strong characters. And the other group was a little more into the role-playing and storytelling side of RPGs, and they were not exactly optimized. You're right, like super combat focused. There were, at least I remember, a couple of players. They wouldn't plan anything ahead for their characters, and they would just, when their level up came, they would just choose options that they thought were like fitting with the story of that character, how that character was developing, even if it wasn't like the optimal choice, so to say. So, like, obviously the kind of power gamer group won, and they won pretty well.
I can imagine how that would happen, yeah.
I mean, it was a good fight. It was, don't get me wrong, it was a good fight, but they definitely were the clear, they dominated the fight, I'd say it that way.
Yeah.
And the losing group, you know, they weren't exactly thrilled at having lost. So let me, is it okay if I say some more here, or did you have some thoughts?
Well, I'll let you say your piece. I mean, I was going to talk a little bit more about this campaign that I was talking about just now, but let me say your piece first.
If you don't mind, let me say something else, because that's just one anecdote of one, you know, I guess 2 specific groups.
Yeah.
Let me kind of take this from a different angle. I've had a couple of campaigns where I and the players, before the campaign started, and we talked about what was, you know, when we prepared for the campaign, and I expressed to them I wanted to run a character-focused campaign where their characters would have not only a backstory, but like a continuing character story that would matter in the world, and there would be, you know, there'd be a strong story element to the campaign, and there would be, you know, a world building and lots of NPCs and different factions, and we would have different adventures or different arcs in the campaign that would focus more on one character at a time, right? Kind of spotlight. Now it's this character's storyline, and for the next level or maybe 2 levels, it's really has a lot to do with that character and their personal story. So everything in RPGs is pro and con. Everything has an upside and a downside, a positive and a negative. There's no perfect really anything. So what were my takeaways from that? What were the upsides and the downsides from that? The upsides were that it was really rewarding. The players, and me too, being involved with that, of like helping create locations and stories and adventures and combats and all of that were based off of what that player gave me, like the concept and their idea of their character. So it was like really satisfying for those players, because they got to go really deep and do stuff that really mattered for their character. It was very significant, very meaningful. And me getting to participate in that as the DM was very meaningful for me as well. So it was like, it was a deep experience. It wasn't like a shallow game. So that was that was awesome. It's like unforgettable. It was one of my favorite campaigns ever.
When you get to feel like a part, like when you're actually an important part of something, that is the best feeling I think in the world. Like, you know, when you actually get like,
great.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But yeah, no, there's a lot of anecdotes.
The downside, though, I gotta say this. I promise. I'll turn it over to you. The downside, though, it takes a lot of prep time.
Yeah,
a lot. It's intensive on the GM. And that's a lot of commitment. And this was a long campaign. We played this campaign for 3.5 years. Actually, next week will be the final session of this campaign. It's been an amazing campaign.
Oh,
yeah. But a very long campaign. Yeah, from level 1 to they're like 15 or 16 now. And yeah, it is a lot of investment, a lot of time, a lot of preparation for the DM, a lot of world building. So it's you know, I know there are some people out there that they don't try being the game master because they get intimidated or kind of overwhelmed with the thought of everything that you might have to do, like what I've just described there, because it is a lot. So I mean, DMing doesn't have to be that way. You can do very short prep time, very minimal prep time, and still have a blast playing D&D, and possibly even still end up telling stories and coming up with things sort of on the fly.
My prep time is like a roller coaster. Sometimes I do a lot of it, and it's just like this long climb to the top, and then just a plummet in prep time, basically, and like, you know, it just decreases at a steady rate. But you know, like in the end, I still get everything I need done in like that one sitting, usually. Sometimes more than one day.
I know what you mean. I would say some sessions or some adventures I prep more for, and some I prep less for. Some have, I got to build a whole new region or at least a whole new location. So there's world building. I got to come up with NPCs. I got to figure out the wilderness region, what the dungeon is, or maybe multiple dungeons, lots of combat encounters and interesting things happening at the dungeon. And yeah, that can be a lot, and a lot of notes. And then other times, whether I just need to calm down and just for my own sake, kind of take it easy, or maybe it's an adventure in an area that I already have developed, then I don't do as much prep time, and I can get away with, like, you know, 1 or 2 hours of prep that will last me for 1 or 2 sessions.
I think your webcam froze on my end.
Oh. Let's see. Everything's looking normal to me. It might just be
There's probably something on my end. That's fine. So, yeah.
Yeah, it might just be how it's coming through.
They're that's fine. It's fine.
Everybody in chat, please let me know if we're having any video issues. Everything's looking normal as far as I can tell in my OBS, though. So those are some things that come to mind when it comes to player driven stories. There was a player I had in one campaign who suggested something that I think is even a step further, but I never did it. Where in this actual session, so live, the players could contribute to the narrative. So a player could say, you know, on the body of the giant that we just killed, I find and they decide what they find, and maybe it's some kind of story-driven thing. or they'll describe a scene, like we return back to the character's hometown, and then the players will say what's happening at their hometown. Like, I find that my family's farm has had a, strange burgeoning of crops, and it's, it's great because we have this huge harvest, but also, why did that happen? And is there some kind of enchantment on these vegetables that everybody's about to eat? And so it's sort of like this live improv. Everybody is contributing to the narrative of what's happening. We didn't actually play it, so I don't know if that's like you would just need the right group with the right players. Because a lot of players, they wouldn't want to do that. Like, they would just say, oh, I'm not good at coming up with stuff. I'm not good at making up stories. So I just want to, be a kind of a tactical war gamer and contribute, at just sort of a normal way with role playing. Have you ever heard of anyone doing that, like a collaborative storytelling?
A collaborative storytelling. Yeah, I've heard of that. I did try to partake in one of those as well at one point, but wasn't really for me. That one,
I've never tried it. I think I would definitely want to try it. I'd be open to it, but it would take the right kind of group.
Yeah, I imagine that.
So,
That-
is there some problem, difficulty, challenge, something you're running up against on the topic of the character driven stories?
Now, this character-driven, or as I call them, player-driven, because in the end, it is mostly driven by like the player's actions. I don't really like run into any trouble until like if something particularly unexpected happens. Like when I might need to take a bit of a break to like think, okay, well, I wasn't expecting this to happen.
Mm-hmm.
How do I solve the problem?
Mm-hmm.
Now, oftentimes the situation gets resolved in some way or another. Of course, sometimes it might end up becoming a bit more of a longer term issue.
When you say break, do you mean like you're playing the session, the let's say player character, the player character does something that is radical and unexpected, and you say, let's take a break here, guys, and we'll come back in 10 or 15 minutes.
Yeah, that's usually what I do. Is like I call for a small break if I cannot come up with a solution on the fly.
That's a good quick fix. Yeah, that's a good tool that the DM has in the toolkit. The in session break. I really like that sort of stuff. I know not every DM does. Some DMs they get really bugged by things that are too far off track. And I think I can understand why that is. I think some DMs, well, the role of a GM can be a lot. You can have a lot on your plate.
Ain't that the truth?
Yeah, you can have a lot that you're juggling. And sometimes if a player character does something that really messes things up, or is this idea
Just
that's
out of the left field.
yeah, this out of left field idea that's just very different, that would really take things off track, I think it makes that DM kind of panic. And
Yeah, no, I can't say I don't
they're
panic
like,
in those
yeah, they're
kind
like,
of situations.
they're already kind of over. They're sort of like at their max. Like, this is as much as my brain can process. And then this thing is like,
then it starts going over, and it's like,
yeah,
okay,
that's the
okay,
straw that breaks the camel's back. And then I think that
Yeah,
kind
no,
of
like-
that freak out then translates into the DM being controlling or irritated, or sometimes
See,
just
I
kinda
have been
rude.
all of those things. Yeah, no, me like
Everybody
I
has.
have-
That's part of the
everyone's
evolution of a
had
GM.
that. Yeah, yeah. That's absolutely true. Yeah, but yeah, I had some anecdotes of like how this player-driven kind of story tends to unfold in my games. It's like, for the first session, of the game. So first of all, this campaign is divided like this is very much inspired by the Markockian style of like you have the law and you have law and you have chaos, and I decided to do something with that. It's kind of like well, one side is a lot more chaotic, one side is a lot more lawful, but in the end, like neither is good or evil per se. Although I did accidentally end up making the ruler on the other side a bit of
Sure.
an evil douchebag. He's a genocidal maniac, even you might say.
Hmm.
He canonically he has committed genocide of an
Mm-hmm.
entire species.
Mm.
He failed. There's still like 200 individuals left. So just
That's
give him a few centuries, and they might
yeah.
they
As I
might
say, that
rebuild.
is ripe for another for a next campaign. That's a story
Yeah,
just waiting to be told.
yeah. But that is one thing. In fact, that storyline might even get concluded in this particular campaign because it has been like on the timeline it has been like 25 years since that genocide took place,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot has happened since then. The guy is a lot older now, still just as bloodthirsty as when he was younger. But then again, what do you expect
But
from a
he's still in
barbarian?
power. He still could be
Yeah, no,
a
he's like a
villain,
power.
a main villain of
He's
the
the most
campaign.
power. Yeah, no, absolutely. He's like the most powerful earl in the kingdom that he ruled over. He's even hell. He's good friends with the king himself. And yeah, no, like that kind of power. If you have that power, like
Mm-hmm.
you are proven to be a powerful villain. So the law side is trying to thwart him, but at the same time, the chaos side is trying to thwart law because I mean, if law gets its reach in there, like that might be the end of like a lot of the freedoms of the people, and of course, law can represent like a lot of things, stagnation among them. But
Sure. Yeah. Excess of order leads to
yeah, excess of
stagnation.
order. Yeah,
Yeah.
actually that's kind of what also motivated the genocide in the end of an entire species. But yeah, so basically, like first session for both groups was just like they meet at a location. Maybe they know each other already. Like maybe some of them already know each other, or maybe they don't. I let the players decide that themselves. So, for
Mm-hmm.
example, for the chaos side of things, we had the anti-paladin and the wizard already know each other. Like the paladin was basically the wizard's um, bodyguard, essentially.
Mm.
Very, very good bodyguard. Unfortunately, the player eventually had to quit the group. We have since replaced her though with a pretty good cleric. We have a pretty good cleric in the group now, so at least they'll live to see another day.
Still a divine character that can heal
Yeah.
and rebuke and do other
But yeah,
such.
basically like yeah, no, first level meet up and maybe put up like maybe have them hear some rumors, maybe give them a bounty board that they can read off of. Like for example, for their first job, I think this Chaos Party in particular. I don't exactly remember what their
Is this fifth
first
edition D
job
and D?
was.
By the way, I was just assuming that.
It is fifth edition D&D. Yeah,
Are you playing, like just kind of core 5e, or are you playing a different, like a
heavily
mod,
modified.
a heavy
Heavily
modified?
modified. Yeah, I'm current. In fact, I'm still modifying it. Like I'm trying to make it more appealing to myself at this point because like I've grown kind of disillusioned with how fifth edition is, and like
Well,
I've
when
even
you first said that you really like swords and sorcery, I immediately thought like, I wonder how he's getting along with fifth edition.
yeah, I've played D&D for 5 or 6 years by this point, and yeah, no, fifth edition like kind of lost its gleam to me towards the end of 2019, I think,
Okay.
and I started realizing that like okay, well, this is a really flawed system. It's not it's not a bad system, but it's like I don't know. It just doesn't feel like Wizards is kind of addressing any of the or any of the problems with the addition of like, for example, things being oversimplified. The CR system doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, and like characters overall, like towards the end of fifth edition's lifespan, have started feeling a lot more powerful. In like you get like early on, you get all these awesome abilities instead of having to work for them, which I feel like is actually kind of a disservice. But Yeah.
There are a number of criticisms I have of fifth edition. I like it a lot. It's my favorite edition of D&D, and I've played third, fourth, and fifth both very heavily, DM'd
Yeah.
most of the time, done a lot of different content creation of my own, from
Yeah. Yeah.
heavily modding to just lightly modding to just some house rules to creating lots of monsters and spells, classes, items, etc.
Yeah,
So, yeah, I do have some criticisms. I have not yet found a different system that I like better.
Well, actually,
Even though I like trying out other systems, and it's interesting.
it's funny you mentioned that. It's funny you mentioned that. So, like, it's needless to say, I think that like I've been going through a lot of different RPG systems, trying to find something that suits my palette.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I've tried OSR. I did like this D&D through the ages kind of thing, where I like for an entire month I played like previous editions of D&D. So like I went all the way from like original back to fifth.
Okay.
Yeah, no,
That must have been quite
that
a
was lot.
sampling.
That was a lot. We were stumped at fourth.
You were what at fourth?
We were stumped at fourth. We were just like it was a lot to take in.
Fourth
After
edition, I don't want to open up a whole other topic. I would just say fourth edition is quite good as its own thing.
yeah, it's like if you don't approach it as D&D, it actually
But
becomes a lot easier.
but if you're playing like D&D through the ages, yeah, fourth edition is going to be like a whoa, like a
I will
quite
say
a
something.
veer off of the road.
Yeah, I will say something in fourth edition's like favor though, because like it does have a lot. It does have some systems that I think actually work. Like for example, I
Yeah.
think like I feel like the giving like monsters these different tiers works pretty well. In like you know you've got the
Minion,
lowest
standard,
move.
elite,
Yeah,
solo.
you got the
Mm-hmm.
yeah minion, standard, elite, and then like yeah things like that. So it's
Yeah,
like that.
overall, fourth edition
I
is
implement it.
pretty good as its own thing. Some aspects of it didn't quite hit the mark, like for example, skill challenges and ritual magic. Great ideas just didn't quite get executed right. But I don't feel interested to go back and play it.
Yeah,
Maybe
me
if it
neither.
was
No.
if like if I don't want to run it. Maybe if it was like the right GM who invited me to play a player, I would play to play a character, right? I would play in somebody
Well, I do
else's
know.
game.
Well, I do happen to know a guy who still regularly plays fourth edition because he
I do
actually finds
too.
it.
I know one guy, and that's still what he plays is fourth edition. That's the one he likes the most.
Yeah, no, I know exactly one guy. Yeah, that's. I think it's gonna be pretty universal across the board. But yeah, no, like after I'd sampled like a lot of different D&D kind of these systems that have been D&D through the ages. I decided to also give like other systems a try because like you know you got all these OSR titles and you've got all these like rules light indie RPGs. A lot of them have good ideas, but then like they just don't like speak to me on a different level. Because like for example, I tried recently I tried this game called the Black Sword Hack, which is well, I mean, based on the name alone, you can probably guess that it was very Moorcock in its execution. And as much as I did enjoy it, it was like this D20 system where you actually have to aim below a certain score, and you know then you've got you know it's a player facing system, meaning that players roll to defend and to attack. The DM doesn't actually roll anything. Didn't really enjoy running it as much as I thought I would.
I've played a good number of systems, and I hope to play a lot more to get more exposure and more experience. I can definitely say that there is a difference between how a game system looks on paper versus how it actually plays out. And that's true both for the system as a whole, just as much as that is true all the way down to the micro level of like individual features, like an actual specific class feature or a specific spell or item or monster, whatever it is.
Yeah.
there is a difference between how something looks on paper and how it actually plays out. Fifth edition thus far is the best that I have come across at both on paper and execution. I think that the situation we find ourselves in now in 2023 is that the system is so good. We've played it so much for so long now that we've kind of gotten used to all that's good about it and kind of incorporated that and sort of take it for granted. And now it's like we're just seeing the flaws. We kind of forget about all the good and it's sort of like when you live with somebody. After you live with a person for a long time, their quirks and their flaws and their little problems and defects, they start to really be noticeable, and they kind of like kind of grate on you.
Yeah, yeah. Also, I noticed that there's a question for you in chat.
Oh, okay.
From Jatham Red.
Jatham Red? Okay.
Yeah.
Let me see.
Very fun
Jatham
chat.
Red. Have either of you tried the BFRPG system? I have not tried BFRPG. What does that stand for? BFRPG.
I'm trying to think right now.
Basic
BFRPG.
Fantasy? I think it's
Oh
basic
yeah,
fantasy.
that's the one. That's the one. Yeah, no. It's the one.
That's
it's
an
the one that
it's an
I thought was
OSR,
gonna go
right?
away because of like the OGL debacle. Because it is because actually basic fantasy, like up until there, I think 4th edition, I have been pretty OGL compliant.
Mm-hmm.
When the OGL debacle happened, a lot of people were afraid that was gonna like affect basic fantasy as a game, and I was like, yeah, no, I'm right there with you. I've tried basic fantasy like at least one, and actually, you know what? Another thing that like when we were still when we're still talking about like RPGs, like, and how we've noticed the flaws in D&D. One thing I noticed was, for example, like how weapons in 5e feel incredibly monotonous. Like, you know, you've got 2 different pole arms, but they do the exact same thing, you know.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't that different in 3rd edition either.
Sure.
But then, like,
there is a little bit
time,
more grittiness or granularity in the 3rd edition weapons, but
yeah, no. I actually took the 3rd edition weapons mechanics because I like the critical ranges on weapons, and I like the critical multipliers on weapons.
okay.
I also took I also took some of your house rules actually because I liked how you did, like, for example, drinking a potion in melee provokes an attack of opportunity from like any threatening combatants. It was like that was one of the good ideas I've heard. And casting certain spells in melee, I've also ruled is gonna invoke that, because like if the enemies see you doing funny movements, they're gonna immediately assume, oh, we gotta stab them now. And I'm gonna force and like if they hit you, I'm gonna force a concentration check.
Now you said certain spells.
Yeah, so basically
some
spells with
spells-
somatic components mostly, because
okay.
or material components, or both, because
What
you
about
need
a spell like inflict wounds? That is a melee touch spell.
Now,
Would
yeah,
that
no.
provoke?
If it's like, okay, so I've ruled if it is a spell specifically that requires specifically a melee spell attack, it does not provoke the attack of opportunity when you cast it, because you're reaching out towards the enemy already as it is. So.
In
But for
4th
example, if you
edition,
had to
in
heal
4th edition, that was that way. If it was a close spell, it did not provoke. If it was a ranged spell, it did.
Yeah. Even magic missile, which doesn't have attack rolls at all, like, that's still like, if they see you trying to shoot those free darts of magic, they're gonna try to cut your hands off in retribution.
Can the opportunity attack ruin the spell?
Yeah,
Can it mess up the
Like,
casting?
if an enemy hits the caster, I call for a concentration check, and if, for example, if the damage is like above 20, the DC is like half of that instead of the. And if they fail the concentration check, which is of course usually, it's usually a DC 10, they lose the spell.
Lose the spell. Okay.
For the day. And then they
I have a few house rules. I try not to go crazy overboard and do a lot of house rules. I try to keep them as minimum as possible. That's what I did with 3rd edition. I essentially just made a modded 3rd edition. I made a Pathfinder back before Pathfinder was a thing.
Yeah, back before you were playing Pathfinder before it was cool.
It was called Legendscape. So it was a very modded 3.5 D&D. And I play just core 3.5 as well. So in 5th edition, I do the opposite thing nowadays. I keep a very minimal amount of house rules. I would say there are
Yeah, no, like
two.
I have a
There are two house rules of mine that I think are probably my two favorites that make the biggest impact. And you will be able to appreciate these as someone who likes sword and sorcery and grittier systems.
let's
So
hear it.
one is when you finish a long rest, that does not refill your hit points.
Yes, absolutely. So, like the way I revamped rests. Okay, I introduced three kinds of rests for my 5th edition campaigns.
Risks?
We've got short rests, which
Oh,
I actually
rests. Uh-huh.
reduced, I actually reduced the short rest's duration to 30 minutes
Okay.
because, like it's a resource that I need the players to exhaust as fast as possible as a dungeon master, so that they don't.
It was only 10 minutes in 4th edition.
Yeah,
Yeah. It
those
was
were the healing. So those were the
quick
healing
breather.
surges, right?
Yep.
Kind of like, yeah. I don't know about those. Anyway, so yeah, then we got the long rest, which I ruled it so. Okay, let's take an example. Name a class.
Berserker.
Any class.
Barbarian.
Okay, barbarian. Yeah. So if you're a barbarian, I like how you just took the first one that in the alphabetical order. But anyway, yeah. So barbarian. Let's assume you're a barbarian. If you take a long rest, you recover 12 hit points plus your level plus your Constitution modifier.
12 because of the
So
D12 hit die?
yeah, because of the hit die.
Okay.
And you get half of your hit dice back after the long rest as per usual. Now, if you want to
Sure.
recover all of your hit points, you got to be in a very secure location and take what is called a full rest, which can last upwards to a week, depending on the severity of your injuries and stuff.
Sure.
Like that.
Yeah. I've also heard people call that extended rest.
Yeah. I mean,
Sure.
I call it a full rest because, like, you come out of it kind of feeling refreshed. You're ready
Sure.
to go back out
full,
there into the
full
wilderness.
on hit points and everything.
Yeah,
Okay.
you're ready to take another rain of arrows from those archers on the ridge.
Okay. So my two are, the first one is you don't get your hit points refilled on a long rest. You still get back half of your hit dice. You can still spend hit dice. Everything works exactly the same. You just don't get the video game replenish. That
Yeah.
helps. That helps with the grittiness and the tension. It makes random encounters more relevant because
Yeah.
it's not just like, oh, doesn't matter. We just throw everything we have at
No,
this random
okay.
encounter, and
I'll
then we're just
also
gonna
admit-
sleep and be back.
Yeah, I'll also admit I have a bad habit of like I check for I always check for random encounters during a long rest, and like there have been times when it has been a real problem for my players in that, like, their long rest has been interrupted. Now, of course, after the first long rest is interrupted, they still get some sleep, so it's not like they're gonna get exhausted right off the bat. But like right now, for example, the Chaos Party hasn't really had time to recover all of their resources because they had they were on their way to a bandit lair. This is another example of like players driving the story forward, because at one point they came across these bandits who were like, "Oh well, we serve our local bandit lord. He dwells in a nearby fort." So yeah, they decided that they're gonna make it their life's mission to kind of hunt down this bandit lord for the time being. Which, actually, they've even met the Earl, because he really appreciates how they're getting rid of a pest in his lands. And, on the way there, they tried to have long rests, and they kept getting interrupted by attacking monsters in the night. I think mostly just wildlife decided to attack them because, like, they felt threatened by this group of people that were just like
Okay.
going through the lands.
Another
At one point,
rabid
there was, like,
moose. Ah!
No, listen. I'm only gonna throw a moose at a party if I want them to TPK, and they haven't
Okay.
deserved that fate yet.
Another rabid badger.
Yeah, no, like it's like no, like it's like they've also gotten jumped by the bandits during one of the long rests, and like when they finally got to the bandit lair, they were like, well, okay, we don't have all of our spell slots, but that's okay. We don't have all of our we don't have all of our cool long rest mechanics. But again, it's gonna be okay. We're just gonna waltz in there. We're gonna murder as many of them as we can. We might have to fall back. We might need to approach this differently. They've been doing okay so far. They reached the sub level, which is where the bandit lord is actually hiding. So like Let's see if they actually reach him. They might actually need to fall back because they recently fought this like giant albino snake, and that that snake, if it had hit them, it would have been a real resource drain trying to undo all the damage that it had done.
Did it
Yeah.
have poison or was it a constrictor one?
It was an incredibly venomous snake. I
Yeah,
actually like
that's nasty stuff.
I gave it a couple of extra d6s of poison damage because like I was like well you know what, I'm gonna write some interesting lore for this thing, you know, when it's gonna be like a ghost snake from like the jungles up to the east, and it's
That's
like this
nasty stuff,
giant,
man.
it's like this extinct giant snake. And like the bandit lord has it as a pet because it was given to him by a witch. And like this, you know, it's pretty crazy. It's pretty crazy stuff in my opinion. But like I'm personally a big fan.
What did the poison have any other nasty effects other than
Well, I
doing
mean, you become poisoned for
obscene
1
amounts of
minute.
damage?
You become poisoned for like 1 hour, and it could have killed whoever it bit because the poison is like incredibly potent. In fact, like, you know, the barbarian got the killing blow, and I described it as the snake dies, some of the venom drips onto her arm, and she feels this burning sensation because the venom is so potent that it just like leaves a scar on her
Oh
skin.
gosh.
You know, a single drop leaves a scar. It didn't deal any damage. It was mostly just like for the effect of like, yeah, no, like I wanted to show off what it might actually what might have actually happened, and it would have been like the most agonizing death a person can die, a person could possibly die.
What level are the characters at this point?
Level 4.
Oh,
They've
yeah.
been
Yeah,
adventuring
that's
they've been
that's a
adventuring for a
death
while
sentence.
now. Yeah, no, that would have been that snake would have been the end of them.
Okay.
Which is it's really lucky that it didn't get any hits off, and it kind of got its head just kind of split in half by the barbarian. Which the barbarian is
True
a member
Conan
of a death
style.
cult. Yeah, no, also the barbarian is a member of a death cult. Yeah,
Well,
but you know,
I guess it
if
depends
she
what kind of
dies,
death cult
she'll
we're
embrace
talking
it.
about. Is if it's
Well,
death
we're
to
talking
monster
we're
snakes that should not exist anymore, given by witches. I'm a fan of that one.
I mean, yeah. Gotta say, I'm a big fan of that one as well. I mean, I imagine
Yeah,
the wizard is as
heebie-jeebie
well.
snakes with xenomorph blood. Yeah, I'm a fan of death to the xenomorph snake cult. That's fine by me.
Yeah, no, I'm also a huge fan of that one.
The second house rule that I use to make things a little grittier and to tone down the kind of like indestructible video game character feel that fifth edition can have is if a character or an NPC for that matter, anybody gets reduced to 0 hit points, but they don't die. Like maybe they get healed or they stabilize or whatever.
Yeah, no.
They
Like
don't die.
I always like, you know, before my players actually like land the final blow, I like ask, are you going for a kill? Are you going for like knocking out? Because like I want to double check, like, you know, do you want to interrogate this person? Do you want to murder this
Oh,
person?
okay.
Which the barbarian actually, like, the barbarian did the party a huge favor by like knocking a couple of bandits out during the ghost snake fight, and they tied them up. They put them up against the wall, and they interrogated the guys actually, because like there was two of them, and they both walked at around the same time. Kind of like, you know, one of them was fiercely loyal. Like I like rolled to see, like, you know,
Sure.
what was both of their
The
reaction. One was
the GM
terrified
behind the
of the
screen
party.
roll.
You know, I did a quick behind the screen roll for both of them, and like it was a 50-50 chance, are they like fiercely loyal, or are they gonna be like terrified of the situation? One was scared of the party. One was like fiercely loyal to this like bandit lord called the Badger. Like, because he's you know, it's funny you
So
mentioned
there
that,
was a
but
badger after all.
yeah, he is a bit of a rabid badger. He also like basically sent the party a message by shooting an arrow next to one of their like henchmen's legs at one point. Like, not through the leg, but just like next to the guy.
Uh-huh.
Kind of like, you
Yeah,
know,
like
he
a
was like trying
menacing
to,
shot. Like
yeah, it was a menacing shot trying to like tell him,
I'm that
hey,
accurate. I can put that
yeah, no,
accurately on
yeah.
your body wherever I want next time.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you know, it was a kind of like, he even tied a red ribbon to the arrow just to like kind of accentuate the point. Like, you know, you see that? That means get the fuck out of my country.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
This is mine now.
that'll be your blood next time.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So
So.
if a character or creature, let's say, gets reduced to 0 hit points and survives or gets healed or whatever, uh, it gets a level of exhaustion.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's actually a bit. Oh my God. You know what? You know what,
That
Esper? You've
that
just
came,
given me a
that
great
came up
idea.
because I I kept coming up with coming in upon these situations where usually a player character, right, would
Hmm.
get hurt with a fireball or a critical hit from a great sword or whatever, some serious hit, and they go to zero
Yeah.
hit points, and then
And
the
then
next
they get
turn,
healed, and then they
healing
get back, and they're
word.
like, "Oh, I'm fine."
I'm fine. Nothing happened. It meant nothing that I got reduced to 0 hit points from,
Yeah.
6 feet of razor sharp steel or a scorching fire blast or whatever it is, or an arrow. Like, where are all these arrows going into this character that they're just fine? So my first thought actually was, oh, I'm going to make this injury system, and I came up with all these kinds of injuries and ways to randomly determine what kind of injury you sustained, depending upon what kind of damage reduced you to zero, and it was very complex and it could be pretty harsh. You could take these really bad injuries, and I found out that this was another one of those cases where on paper, whoa, this looks really cool. In play
Yeah.
was not so cool because
Yeah.
it was very complicated to implement. It was very complex and it was very harsh. And a lot of
Well, I do.
people just don't want that level of harshness.
No, I do actually.
So
Okay. So.
I did the level of exhaustion as a abstraction of you have an injury. We could
Mm,
narratively describe the injury if we want to, but mechanically how it impacts you is a level of exhaustion. And that could get
yeah.
worse after you take multiple levels of exhaustion. Like, that really impacts your character. That's seriously detriments you. But it's not like your whole arm got cut off or you've got a concussion so bad that you can't remember a single spell.
Hmm.
So those two rules, the long rest does not automatically refill all your hit points, and if you get knocked to zero but still survive, you get a level of exhaustion. Those two things really help to increase the grittiness, the realism, and the tension in the fifth edition games without majorly messing with fifth edition. Like, the characters are still very strong, and it's not this huge, like, uh shitty DM house rule that's like overbearing.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
nice
Actually.
balance, right? It's a
Yeah.
nice kind of it works out well.
Hmm.
I wish
Nah,
fifth edition from the get go would have actually put, like, in the Dungeon Master's Guide, like, here are, let's say, 3 different scales of grittiness, and when you're starting a campaign, talk with the players and let them know, are you playing, standard, gritty, or hardcore? And the standard would be like what we just would think of as core fifth edition, with
yeah.
in terms of like healing enough. And then the gritty would be kind of like what I've described, where it's a sort of balanced one. It's sort of moderate. It's not extremely harsh, but it definitely bumps up the tension and the danger a bit. And then the harsh could be like, a short rest is 8 hours. A long rest is like what you described. Like, you have to be in a safe place with like food, water, good temperature, secure, and spend like days there recovering from wounds to get a long rest.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. Okay. So you just reminded me. Uh, of like these looking good on paper and then like not ending up not really looking that great in practice. One thing that actually like sticks out like a sore thumb as an example of that is I was trying to implement this new like exhaustion system because I didn't like how fifth edition does exhaustion, so I thought, you know what, I'm going to implement 2 new conditions: fatigued and exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
uh, but then I run it in practice. But then I tried to like run it in my head in practice, and I realized, oh my god, this penalizes marshals, and casters are once again put on the forefront. And like
Mm-hmm.
then I looked at the mirror, and for a second I saw a flash of like Monty Cook from third edition.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, no, because Monty Cook, if you don't know, he's the reason that third edition favored casters as much as it did.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, yeah. So I was like,
Yeah,
oh
third
god, I'm
edition was
becoming
definitely a
Monty.
caster's edition.
Yeah, it wasn't great.
Fourth
Then
edition has the
they did try
opposite
to.
problem where they balanced all the classes out, but then they all just felt the same.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like
They just went from one problem to another. Fifth edition, I think,
exactly.
did a pretty good job of hitting the sweet spot. You
Yeah,
could kind of argue the casters do outshine to a degree, and I think that's true.
I mean, yeah, but at
But
higher levels,
but
casters are
it's
supposed
not
to kind of outshine other classes in the end because, like, you've
classically,
reached that
yeah,
level of power, you should be able to, like, blot out the fucking sun.
yeah,
Okay, maybe don't blot out the sun, but because that's a bad
yeah.
idea.
I actually I do like that. I again comparing it to fourth edition, I was very disenchanted with how nothing felt special, nothing felt unique, nothing felt like, I survived as a D6 or even D4 in the old school hit die wizard, dealing with no armor and being kind of frail, and managed to
Yeah,
survive all this way to develop magic, which is supposed to break all the laws of physics and the universe and whatnot. But
but no,
I'm
because in
doing
fourth edition
nothing
you had
that's
Spellblade. Yeah, no,
but
because
I'm
like you
doing
had that.
nothing that's any different than what the fighter can do in terms of the
Exactly.
actual impact in the game.
You
So
just got these lame powers that just kind of don't. It
I
doesn't
would
feel
say
like
this. Here's what I would say. I
okay.
would not want the fifth edition spellcasters to be reduced in power.
Hmm.
Keep them how they are. I just wish that the warrior types would get a little more support and a little bit more like epic abilities at the higher levels.
Yeah,
They
no,
don't
like
really
there
have
was just
much
like
of that. There's a little
I tried
bit,
to.
but not a lot. It's usually just like your features that you've had for a long time just get incrementally a little bit better all the way to level 20. There's not a lot of like, whoa, you are kind of breaking into not magic, but still something that is like there's something supernatural or beyond the ordinary happening because this
Yeah,
character is like your soul is this epic hero soul, like this legendary essence is flowing through you so you can do things
well, I mean, yeah,
that
no, like
maybe
that
would
kind of
seem
stuff.
like magic to like a first level character or a commoner.
Yeah, yeah, no, like that kind of supernatural stuff. Like and I don't have a problem with it, but like, sometimes like I feel like fifth edition is already oversaturated with supernatural and like you know, I
That is that
actually
I
I
would
had a
agree
friend.
with that. I would agree with that.
I had a friend who actually counted 38 of the 74 player races get cantrips or first level spells as a racial feature.
Mm.
And I thought that was kind of ridiculous. I was like, oh god, like that's over half of them, and it's
Okay, well, check this out. Name an official 5th edition class that has no way of getting spells. No subclass that gets spells or anything magical. They have no, a classic, there's no magic at all. There isn't one.
sir, I'm not. So, yeah, no, I was about to say, sir, I'm not Heracles. I can't do impossible. I can't do 12 impossible tasks
There is
for you.
no class in 5th edition that can't get you access to some kind of magic. Even the barbarian has a wild magic subclass.
Yeah, no. Also, like the beast barbarian kind of feels magical from like that was another Tasha's
It
subclass.
has primal magic. Yeah, like druidic type
Yeah,
magic.
it's
Yep.
I don't really like understand why like all these barbarians are magical. Like I get that they I get that it like stems from like these
I can
different
tell you why.
cultures where you've got like
I can tell you why. There's actually a very simple answer to this. It's because the design space for non-magical things is about this big. And the design space for magical things is infinitely big.
mm,
It's hard to design a lot of non-magical features.
yeah, no, like okay, so
You
like for example,
you
another thing
keep
that
coming up against limits. You got to get very creative thinking to design a bunch of non-magical stuff. I know this because in the book I'm working on, Monstrous Heroes, there are a lot of monster classes that either they don't have magic or, the magic is just in one of the subclasses. And I had to come up with all of these different features that are not magical. Yes, extraordinary. Yes, could be legendary. Yes, could break what normally you would think is within the limits of reality, but still not, shooting radiant damage out or conjuring up a being from another plane. Nothing like that. And
Yeah,
it's challenging, man. I'm telling you, it's hard.
yeah, nah, no kidding. No, absolutely. Like, that was ridiculous. Like, it's like I've actually tried to design like these different classes before, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna try to revise the Berserker. You know what I ended up doing? I accidentally ended up creating like a mythological version of the wolf skin warriors from like Norse stories, and I was like, God fucking damn it. It was like there's this like, because like one of the features that I made for the Berserker was like this quasi beast transformation where like where your like mouth distorts into a whiskered snout, and you've become a lot hairier while you're raging, and it's like, oh, that's another supernatural thing. That's another
Yeah,
magical
it's
element right there.
man,
It's
it's
like,
very very difficult.
tell me about it. But yeah, no,
There was
so,
something I was just gonna say in
oh.
my previous book, the Emporium.
Yeah, I have Esper's Emporium.
You have
Okay,
okay,
excellent.
cool. So in Esper's Emporium of Esoterica, there is a subclass for Barbarian and a subclass for Fighter that are strictly non-magical. The Barbarian one is straight up inspired by Conan, Path of the Reaver, and the Fighter one is the Gladiator Fighter. And they have quite a bit of options. I like to think they're pretty dynamic.
What is that?
Not...
What is that like? I know like 3 Paths of the Reaver now. So
Oh,
like, okay,
really?
okay. Yeah, no, there's like 3 Paths of the Reaver. So like, for example, my friend Glenn, he likes this like older setting called Mystara. He wanted to convert it to
Uh-huh.
5th edition to like kind of make the setting more popular again. And during the creation process, he created a single barbarian subclass, which is called the Path of the Reaver. And
Okay.
it's basically like this pirate barbarian that like takes combat drugs just before entering combat, and they take damage from taking the drugs, but they make up for it because the drugs give them like extra damage and stuff like that.
Okay.
And yeah, no, like they do need to
Well, a
replenish.
pirate would be a reaver, just one that is on the water or coastal.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
So yeah,
Because a reaver is
yeah,
basically a marauder,
yeah,
like a
essentially.
robber, a warrior,
Mhm.
thief.
Yeah. And then there's another,
Which is what
there's another
Conan.
Path of
Which is
the
what
Reaver.
Conan is. Conan is
Yeah,
literally a
exactly.
reaver.
Yeah, no, he ends up marauding quite a bit, but
Yes,
he's a lot more than that. I do dare
he
say
is
he's a
more.
lot
He
more
is
than
more
that.
than that.
In the
He's
stories,
also
for
an
example, like,
anti-hero.
yeah, he's also an anti-hero. He's also straight up just a hero in some stories, because he like for example in
I
Black Colossus, he leads this like heroic defense of
Sure.
Karaja against Nathok. So, like,
And
would an
yeah,
anti-hero do
and
that?
especially once he becomes king, I think he shifts more to hero.
Yeah, except for Scarlet Citadel, I do dare say that in Scarlet Citadel he was like pretty brash in his. He was usual Conan.
But people,
Uh,
I don't think the hero Conan so quickly comes to mind as much as the anti-hero Conan, where it's like
yeah, like the Conan you see
wanderer,
in Queen of the Black
thief.
Coast. Yeah, or Tower of the
It,
Elephant. That
yeah,
Conan is definitely not a hero.
yeah.
Well,
But he just
unless you ask Kosha, but
right. But then he's like the perfect example of the anti-hero. He happens upon demons or a cult or some evil sorcerer and fights them and kills them, not because he's like out to do good, but because he's fighting for his life, or because he's like
yeah,
terrified
and
of their
also
horrible
like,
magic, and just
yeah,
happens to help everyone that they're oppressing by killing them.
yeah, no, that's what happens in Tower of the Elephant as well. Like, he's in Zamora, or wait, was he in Vendaya at the time? I can't remember what part of Hyboria he was in, but like he was like basically he was like in the city, and he finds
That's
out
I
about
love
stuff.
that story. That's one of my favorite Conan stories.
Yeah, no, it's one of my favorites as well because, like, Yag Kosha or Kosha of Yag because Yag is the planet he's from. Actually, that's a fun fact. But yeah, no, Yag Kosha is like is an interesting character, and like it's kind of like this indirect link to Lovecraft, to the
Lovecraft.
Lovecraft mythos as well. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, so like, but yeah, no, like, the Esoterica Reaver is another one, and then there's a third Reaver subclass that I can't quite remember right now what it's called. Like, what I mean, I know what it's called. It's the Path of the Reaver, but I just don't remember what it does right now. But yeah, no. Turns out that Path of the Reaver is a pretty common name for these kinds of things. Apparently,
It's a good word. It's a strong
it's a
word.
good word. Yeah, I mean,
Victor,
personally, like, I feel like
we should probably wrap up here. This has been an excellent conversation. I'm going to go on to the other topic that I have to get to.
yeah, understandable. I'm going to be lurking in the chat, of course.
Sure. Please,
I would love
please
to
do.
donate some more gold, but unfortunately, like as it stands, the pirate lords of Narleen do not have anything more to give. Turns
Well, thank
out
you.
their coffers are empty now.
Well, thank you. Either way, man, I very much appreciate your participation and the support in all meanings of the word. And yeah, I'll shoot you a message sometime soon.
Absolutely. Oh, also, you were mentioning something about the scrolls of the bard, but I think you were interrupted by something in the chat. Oh wait, no, it was the no audio thing from my end. And
Okay.
You were trying to tell people about the scrolls of the bard coming up and what you were including in it.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. So you'll see that I'm going to try to get this next issue out earlier in the month, and I was really more than impressed. I was blown away about how your concept really is more than a concept. You gave a fully created monster. Now I've gone and given it my treatment. So you'll have two versions of it. You'll have your version and you'll have my version. And but I was really blown away by how you had the full stat block, stories, lore, a reference image. Like that was, I never have gotten a concept like that before. That was so fleshed out. So,
well, I appreciate
it. I was really impressed.
Yeah, thank you.
And I hope you like my version of the Butcher Fiend.
We will see, because I am very much looking forward to like your version of this.
Sure.
This, like, horrible, chaotic hunter demon.
In some ways, basically. it will be much like yours, and definitely in the spirit of what you submitted. But in other ways, you'll see some differences, and who knows? Maybe I'll even give you some of my thoughts about why I made the choices that I made. So.
Yeah, no. Like, absolutely. Like, I'll look forward to seeing it. And
cool.
Yeah, no, it was good talking to you.
Likewise, it was a pleasure. Well, I'll see you around, man.
No, like, yeah, maybe we'll even in the future end up doing another one of these. Who knows?
Yeah, man. I have an idea. I'll shoot you a message later on about it, and we'll see what you think.
We'll see. Yeah.
All right. Take care, Victor.
You as well, Esper. Cheers.
Cheers. All right, so I've got a second topic. I guess this is going to be a bit of a longer Bardstream, but it's fine by me. I was really engrossed in that conversation. Then I realized, oh, wait, we've been going for like an hour and a half. So this comes from a different patron of mine who was drawn in the previous drawing. He's not only a patron, he's also a player in a campaign of mine. His name is Mike. So thank you, Mike, if you're listening, or if you hear this later. Very much appreciate your patronage and support and all the participation that you've had, both from my Patreon and both from our campaign. Actually, Mike plays in that campaign that I was just talking to Victor about, where it was very based upon the characters' personal stories and had a big focus on the storytelling side of things, on the role-playing side, and has gone on for a long time. It's been a long, I think 3.5 years we've been playing this campaign. So amazing campaign, definitely one that will remain in my memory, my heart forever. So Mike was asking about ships and sea-based campaigns, ship combat, creating ships or modifying ships, everything to do with ships and sea, coastal, island themed campaigns. I was actually talking to a different friend of mine the other day about this kind of campaign. And I know Mike has been running Ghosts of Saltmarsh adventures, plus adding in his own stuff as well for quite a while. It's been an ongoing campaign of his, and that has a lot of aquatic and sea and ship-based content. So I don't rehearse my answers to these kinds of questions. I just kind of let things go off the top of my head. There's a number of different experiences I've had with this kind of stuff in D&D, with ships and with ship combat and with kind of large-scale combat that involves vehicles and structures that are destructible. And I would first start off with the advice of determine what you're trying to do with the ship combat. I think that's the first thing you need to really figure out. What are you trying to do with this? Is the ship combat just really just an aesthetic, like just a tone, a feeling, a backdrop, an environment? It's just that, the same as, you're in a cave, so you see cave terrain. You're in a forest, so you see trees. The terrain could have some impact, right? Like the trees and rocks and stuff can provide cover, tall grasses or bushes that people could hide in. A cave, also could have blocking terrain like that. Maybe the cave has a pit or an underground river that maybe someone could fall in and take falling damage and have to spend a round trying to climb out of. So some terrain features, some environment to evoke the feeling of the place that you're at. Is that what you're wanting to get out of it? Is that really all that you need it for? Because that's perfectly fine if you only want to do that, because that already is going to involve some planning and some note-taking on your part. Not a ton, but it will involve some. So you will have to invest some time and some effort into that, and you'll have to be thinking about it during the campaign, those kind of terrain elements and dynamic elements. So that is another layer that you'll have to be thinking about and employing as a game master in those encounters. And it's a cool thing to employ those kinds of terrain elements. I like to do that in combat encounters. Not every combat encounter, but certainly with some regularity. I think it makes the combats more interesting and more dynamic. So that's one way you could approach it, and that's perfectly fine. The next level is a little more involved. So let's say maybe you want it to be more interactive. The vessels, the ships can move, and if there's an enemy ship, you'll need to know, where is one moving in relation to the other. And if there's like stationary terrain, where are they in relation to that island over there, or that rock formation jutting up out of the water, or that whirlpool over there, whatever it is. And you'll have to keep track of their heading, right? Because unless you don't care and your players don't care and just make it like really, really loose in terms of the realism, like not non-realistic, even a small amount of realism, you're going to have to keep track of what is the heading of the ship, which direction is the ship heading in. You can't turn too much per round. You can't just immediately stop. The ship, even if you're putting all your effort into stopping it, it's going to take a little while to slow it down and get it stopped. How much crew is necessary? If your crew gets reduced, is the ship now slower, or the ship can't do as much? You're going to have to keep track of the hit points of the ship. Since you have Ghosts of Saltmarsh, I'm sure you've already looked at in depth the section about ships, and those rules are pretty good. they're not perfect. They have some flaws, and they are on the complex side. If you implement them, the trade-off of like the that level of interactivity, interactiveness, that level of interactiveness and realism, the the price that you pay for that is it does slow your combat down a bit. You're going to have more stuff that you're going to have to think about. You're going to have to track the hit points and the armor class and stuff of the different sections of the ship. You have to you know, implement the consequences of if your sails get destroyed, or if your helm gets destroyed and the ship can't, you can't make turns anymore, or the implications of if some of your crew get killed. So there's a lot. There's like maybe 2 more layers of complexity that you're adding on if you go with that level of interactiveness. And that really involves the ships almost like creatures. It's that level of complexity where they have movement, they have like maybe actions or siege weapon attacks, they have hit points, and they really can impact things. A piece of advice that was going to go along with this, let's say, interactive level of detail is that you can bet the player characters are going to try to destroy the enemy ship. At least try to destroy key parts of it. They're going to try to destroy, the siege weapons. They're going to try to destroy the helm. They're going to try to take out sails or oars or whatever magical propulsion system it has. If you go to that level of detail, the players are going to try to do that. So if you are okay with that level of complexity, if you're okay with the combats being a bit slower and more granular and like this higher level of strategy involved and more note-taking, then cool, go with it. I've done that in a number of different encounters in multiple campaigns, and it is pretty cool. You just have to understand the price you will pay to implement that, and if it's worth it for you. Since we're talking about this, you should also think of what is the technology level of your world. I don't personally use firearms. I don't run that kind of world currently. I'm not opposed to it. It just doesn't fit in the current worlds that I have developed. And I've by this point I've developed a few different D&D. I've developed a few different worlds in which I play D&D, and I like those worlds a lot. But none of them use, flintlock pistols or muskets or blunderbusses or cannons for that matter. It's not, it's not like Renaissance era or high Renaissance era. It feels more like an old world, drawing inspiration from medieval and antiquity and ancient mythology. And, of course, plenty of sprinkling in of fantastical general fantasy elements. So that means on the ships, it's not going to be shooting cannons at each other with like black powder and cannonballs. It's going to be ballistas, maybe some kind of ship-based trebuchet or mangonel or catapult. It's going to be, characters firing arrows and crossbow bolts. Spells and magic will largely take the place of something like cannons. Scorching rays, fireballs, fire bolts, lightning bolts, call lightning, etc. Those sorts of things. They're complex battles. This is going to quickly lead into another decision you'll have to make of the scale of the battles. I've tried some different things in 5th edition in terms of like mass combat. 5th edition does not handle mass combat well. I'm going to tell you right now. It's not good. There was an Unearthed Arcana article about mass combat rules some years ago. I don't remember now. 3, 4, 5 years ago, something like that. And I did play test them myself. They're not good. They kind of work in the right situation, especially if the two different sides are relatively close to each other in terms of power. And even then, they just kind of work. And then outside of that, they're not very good. I made a heavily modified version. I can't even say a modified version. I kind of made my own version that drew initial inspiration from that Unearthed Arcana article, and then I took it and ran with it and kind of expanded it into my own thing. And I played that out in a certain arc of my Mirrormorn livestream campaign, and it was not great. It was overcomplicated to a degree that I never want to ever do again. It was too much. It was not good. So 5th edition is not good at mass combat. So what do you do? Okay, so because when you think of ship combat, you think of ship crews. Ships need crews. That's just how things are. Unless you've got a very small ship. But as soon as you get into any kind of like, sailboat or warship or cogs and caravels and I'm forgetting like one of the main categories of ship, long ships. Any noteworthy size of ship, you're gonna have a crew. How big is the crew? 24 guys? 50 guys? 100 guys? How big is your ship? It's a lot of crew. It's a lot of people. So you're going to get into sort of bigger scale combat when you do this. How do you handle that? Because you've got your whole party of 4 or 5 people. There's going to be some NPC on their ship, usually, like something, at least like some kind of first mate or kind of like someone with some rank. There has to be rank and order on a ship. There has to be organization. Otherwise, the thing is just gonna it's just gonna turn into chaos. It's not gonna function. Just like any business, any military, any organization, you have to have structure to it. So, okay, there's a couple ways you can handle this that I have learned the hard way through trial and error that work good. I'm going to talk about 2 or 3 different options. I'll start with the first, and we'll call this option A. Option A. The greater combat that involves like all of the party's crewmen and then the enemy's crew, like all of the lower ranking, let's say dozens of people that are there at the encounter, don't actually track them in terms of like every creature's initiative and hit points and attack and take their turn is going to take forever. That combat is going to be a tedious grind, and it will take you like 2 or 3 sessions to run that encounter. So option A is don't do that. You will only keep track of the hit points and initiative and all the combat info of the party, maybe 1 or 2 important key NPCs, like named NPCs that are very meaningful to know where they are, what they're doing, and then the key monsters. So you essentially just prepare a regular combat encounter the way you would in any old adventure that you run, okay? Only prep that in terms of like your DM notes of your hit points and initiative and all that. Then all of the other, let's say, extended NPCs, good guys and bad guys, all of those other ones that are there, make them function like terrain effects and story. Okay, so here's what you could say. You could say, this area here on the map, there is constant fighting. There are exchanges of crossbow bolts and arrows, and maybe there's even one side has even invaded another side's ship, and there may be melee fighting as well. These are active combat zones. If you enter a combat zone for the first time on your turn, or you start your turn there, whatever X effect happens, maybe it's like make a dexterity saving throw. On a failure, you take 2d6 damage because you got hit with something, because you're there where you're in an active combat zone. Or if you start your turn there or enter into there, you have to make some kind of skill check, like acrobatics check to avoid getting hit, or an athletics check that represents you like jumping and like blocking and fighting off. You can make it up, what skill check you think is important, or you could leave it up to the players. Decide your skill check and, describe it narratively how you're using that skill. You're using Arcana to use like magic to ward off or scare off enemies or blast away these like minor scraggly enemy shipmates. And if you hit the DC, then you don't take the damage. If you fail the DC, you take whatever it is, 2d6 damage or 2d8 damage or 3d10 damage. Just to scale the damage to make it fit the danger level of the type of enemies that are involved. You can just follow like the Dungeon Master guidelines for damage effects for like terrain and traps and stuff. Just it's right there in like the terrain hazards or trap section. It's also in Xanathar's Guide to Everything. You can use that as a baseline for how much the damage is. So I don't know what level your characters are, but let's say your characters are like level 7, so an effect like that of the danger of being in like this active combat zone, it's probably going to be like DC 15, maybe DC 17, somewhere around there. And on a failure, a character's probably going to take like, I can actually quickly reference something here. I'm going to say like maybe 4d6. I guess I can't quickly reference it. No worries. Yeah. But just check out those charts. Those are good advice to follow. And then if you're not in that active combat zone, you just aren't subject to that potential hazard. So that's approach A, right? Prepare the combat encounter like a normal combat encounter. You really only focus on the characters, maybe an important NPC or two, and then like the important enemy monsters that are like directly engaging important enemy NPCs that are directly engaging the player characters, and then all of the extended kind of minion level crew on both sides. They just compose this terrain hazard. You can even, if you want, at the end of every round of combat, the very last thing at the end of every round, just do a roll as the DM, just to do a D20 roll to just check and see how each side is doing, right? You can assign like, this represents the enemy forces. How well are the enemy forces doing? If I roll a 1, they did terrible that round, and the characters and their allies' forces struck some kind of like devastating blow. That could maybe even reduce the damage on that combat zone. Or you roll a nat 20, it's like the opposite thing, where you describe, it's more of a narrative device. You describe that the enemies just took down like a whole group of the party's allies or the party's crew. And if you rolled like a 10, it's sort of an even. Some sides are, each side is taking a bit of losses, and then everything in between. So you can put in that narrative element. That's approach A. Approach B is you do involve all of the combatants on both sides, but you still don't go to the nitty-gritty of putting an initiative and a hit point and an attack of every single little, what would they be? Like each crewman is like the stat block of guard or bandit or commoner or something, and each enemy is the equivalent of like a stat block of hobgoblin or orc or kobold. Still don't do that, because if you have like 50 combatants total, it's going to be that tedious slog. Plus, another problem with that is as soon as the the party's wizard or sorcerer throws a fireball in there, they're just gonna like cook like 1/3 of all of the enemies in one spell. So what you do instead is you do some kind of mob mechanic or some kind of horde mechanic. I've been creating horde monsters recently. I've already put a couple into the last couple Scrolls of the Bard newsletters. I'll probably put out some more in the near future. I also made a video about it recently. It's on my channel. It's like breakthrough that I had recently about large groups of creatures in a fight, something like that. So I figured out that you can make this like huge or maybe even gargantuan size, sort of like a swarm horde of like small or medium sized creatures. So you got like this huge size token, which is like horde of pirates or troop of ship guards, whatever you want to call it. And they're like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They're like, their CR is like 6 higher than what it would be of just one of those individual creatures. So in the video and also in the recent newsletters that I just mentioned, like a horde of orcs, I believe is CR 6 compared to a CR 1/2 single orc. And go check out that video. Go check out the video. Maybe check out those newsletters, and you'll see what I've done. And what that does is that abstracts like a dozen or 2 dozen creatures into just one sort of swarm-like creature. And it's a very efficient way to represent a whole bunch of creatures, and you only have to keep track of like that one horde's hit points, and it will make, you know, probably 2 attacks on its turn, and once its hit points get reduced to half, it will just make 1 attack. And then each of those attacks is just an abstraction. It just represents lots of attacks being volleyed in by the horde. There are also some optional rules or alternate rules or whatever you want to call it in the Dungeon Master's Guide for mob attacks, where it does take a bit of prep work. It is a bit fiddly, but it works pretty well. I won't go into that because you can just go into the Dungeon Master's Guide and look at mob rules. I have enjoyed using them before. They're not amazing, but they are pretty good. I would say they are worth using, and they function pretty well. And that is also another way where you can speed things up and abstract a bunch of creatures all, you know, swinging swords and shooting in crossbow bolts all simultaneously. So option A and option B, both of those work good. I definitely can recommend both of those. I don't know if I have a third option. I will just stick with those 2. Yeah. Upgrades and mods to the ships. You got to get creative with this. And I might have some notes that I can send you, because in the Land of Dreams and Nightmares, we got into doing some of this. And this has been a few years now, so my notes are probably going to be a little, right, could use a little revision, a little tune-up, but they work pretty good. And I got some inspiration from Matthew Colville's Strongholds and Followers, and then also some from the Ghosts of Saltmarsh, because both of those have things that are like upgrades and modifications to ships and to strongholds, castles, wizards' towers, layers, etc. You can also look at like layer actions for monsters that have layer actions to get some ideas from those too. I did modify them quite a bit, especially the ones that I found, the ideas that I found in Strongholds and Followers. I found that a lot of those options for upgrades were not so well balanced. I was actually pretty surprised at how overpowered some of them were. But good ideas. I like the ideas. So basically, it's a matter of, kind of like with magic items, the players either save up wealth and then purchase the upgrade, either from some kind of shipwright or shipyard that, like, you know, literally, you know, puts a physical augmentation onto the ship, like a stronger hull or adding more siege weapons or whatever the case is, or some kind of magical thing where you have to go to a wizard or an artificer or some kind of mages guild, and they put some magical enhancement onto the ship and you pay them. Or maybe the party themselves has party members in the party or some character that can imbue some kind of magic, or they go on some adventure, and instead of them, later spending treasure or gold, just as part of the treasure of the adventure, they find some, you have found the skull of Al-Kathun, and if you spend, whatever, a 1 hour ritual attuning the skull to your ship, and you keep the ship like down in the underbelly of the ship or down in the hold, your ship has this aura, not aura, but like specters that patrol it. And now there's, 4 specters that are always guarding your ship. And that's just part of the treasure, instead of giving the characters, a chest of 1,000 gold pieces or a, +1 sword of fire burst. Yeah, so that just kind of relies on your creativity. I might see if I have some notes that would be worth sending over to you, and then look at the Ghosts of Saltmarsh section and perhaps Strongholds and Followers. Do modding as you see fit to make things suit well for your tastes. All right, well, I hope all those thoughts were helpful for you, and I think I'll be wrapping things up here. Thanks, everybody in the chat. I didn't really get into any chat questions. Victor put a super chat in there. Oh, look, more gold. Turns out I forgot to shake down the pirate lords for the pocket change. You always got the funny quips, man. Much appreciation once again to Victor. And anyone who's interested, go check out the Patreon page. Even just the $5 a month Lore Keeper gets you the full newsletter, the full battle map, and an entry into the drawing every month. So a lot of really cool rewards are available just at a pretty low amount. And I appreciate you all, whatever it is, even if you're just someone who watches these and leaves a comment. I look forward to seeing you all in another video sometime soon. I've got some interesting ideas. Just might be a surprise in store for you for what I pull off on the next video. And as always, may your adventures be many.